Excellent. Welcome, everyone. So we are in the final week before Pesach this year. It begins on Saturday night. And in our weekly email, I've talked a little bit about how that goes. However, if people want to ask in this class, Rabbi, can you go a little bit how we transition into Pesach? What do we do with the egg matzah? Happy to answer those questions at the end. This class is really just a chance for people to kind of make sure you feel prepared and not overwhelmed for Pesach. Now, in terms of how to kosher for Pesach, I'm not going to go through all the details. I really hope to be able to leave some space for people to ask their specific questions. They're beautiful guides. There's a particular book available online in English from an Israeli rabbi who is just so well written, brings the sources, and very practical. How do you kosher the stove, oven, etc., like that. We'll touch on some of those, but if you want a more thorough guide, I'm happy to give suggestions. But again, the one I mentioned is Rabbi Eliezer Melamed Penine Halacha. You just type that in phonetically and you'll find it. What I do want to do tonight is kind of a bullet points. Some of the main things, theoretical things about what we can and cannot eat on Pesach, what we need to sell, what we need to store, and what isn't a big deal. We could either just use or we don't have to buy special, et cetera, like that. A little bit then about how to kosher some things, both for Pesach specifically, and then some of this is general koshering things. And then again, as I said, at the end, we'll open it up for questions. But as you have practical questions throughout, this is only 2 pages of quick notes, but if we don't get to the end, but people actually get questions answered, that's the goal of tonight's class, is to really help you all feel better prepared, not overwhelmed, and realize that while Pesach is a beautiful and it's a big mitzvah, and there is a lot of work that goes into it, it should not drive us crazy. If we're doing it in that way, we've gone too far. When people are putting their Barbie dolls in the washing machine, taking their fine books, leaving them out on the balcony for 2 weeks so that they get ruined, putting tinfoil on their floors, perhaps we've gone a little bit too far. And there is a difference between being strict, in which case we are. Our custom is to be strict on Pesach. It's a very high-level mitzvah. The Torah mentions it multiple times about not eating chametz. So if you have 2 opinions, a little more lenient, a little more strict on Pesach, go with the strict one. But that's not the same as making up new laws that are crazy and unnecessary to make our lives more difficult. So before I jump in, are there any just questions on that before we go into it? Excellent. So Lindsay, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you to start. Although you know what? I realize I'm unmuting you, but the way this is set up, there's not really anything to read. So I'll read it. And then Lindsay, if you have a question, I'll give you, first dibs as it were. But basically the first thing is just, what are the products that we either, and this is important, either sell, which is the universal custom. I updated and fixed the link to the Mechirat Chametz form. And literally as we speak, the person who hosts our website and the person who designed in it are sending emails back and forth with language that I only understand 1 out of every 5 words, and our website is going live tonight. In fact, most of it is live except for the homepage. So if you know what you're looking for, you can go straight to it. If you just go to the homepage, it's not ready yet. But for those who want to sell or those whose custom it is to just get rid of any real chametz from their house, here are the basic things. Chametz is only things that are made from one of the 5 grains, which are wheat, oats, rye, barley, and spelt. I don't know what else would be considered a grain. I guess technically some might consider rice a grain, but that's not really chametz. That's in another category we'll talk about later. We don't eat rice, at least as Ashkenazim, but it's not chametz. But things made from these food, come back to that, food made from these 5 products is chametz, and we either have to throw it out, eat it before Pesach, or sell it. Now, what I did here is just a couple things that we may not think about. The Torah and the rabbis are clear. It's not just about not eating it. We also can't do anything with it. We can't sell it. If we have a wheat store or a beer store or a whiskey store, you can't sell it on Pesach. You can't run that store. You have to get rid of it. You can't get any benefit, including feeding it to our pets. And again, I want to mention that we're so sorry, Susan, for your cat. But for many people, that you started out by saying that that's a question many people have, is what do we feed our pets? They don't have to keep kosher, no, but we're not allowed to use anything that has chametz in it, including pet food. So the solution to that is we don't have to get OU pet food, but people have to get pet food who want to follow the laws properly that is grain-free. And fortunately, it's very easy through a Google search, and many kosher organizations will list dog, cat, and other such foods that are appropriate for Pesach. I think Purina makes a grain-free one, et cetera, but that's something that people would have to sell the pet food through the form and then buy separate food to feed their cats. Again, we can't eat it, and we can't get any benefit from it, including giving it to our animals, and also beer or whiskey, et cetera, like that. So any food items, whether we're eating it or we're feeding it to someone that we own or belongs to us, is no good on Pesach. Sell it or get rid of it or give it away to a food bank. Don't give cat food to a food bank for people, though. That's not what I'm implying here. So that's the huge theoretical thing, just a general what we're not allowed to eat on chametz. And the Torah does not tell us why chametz is bad. There's different hypotheses from the rabbis. Perhaps there's some connotation of idolatry related to it. But again, why is it permitted? The rest, it's never permitted in the Beit HaMikdash as a sacrifice ever. On a Tuesday in the middle of Sukkot, you can't make chametz in the temple. So there's something about chametz in the sacred space that on Pesach becomes universal. So any questions on that before we move on? Excellent. The next category is the most complicated one of all, and I don't want to rush through it, but a little bit, is what about things that either have chametz or are made out of these grains, etc., but they're not either they're not food or they're not cooked in anything. If you make an oat cookie, it's chametz, definitely can't have it. But what if you just have oats? And so, already in number 1.5, I have flour and oats there. Are flour and oats chametz? And the answer has to do with how they are prepared. Because the way that something becomes leavened and rises is you take the wheat, whatever it is, or one of these grains, and you add water. Well, in most cases, the way that flour is made is there's a part of the process where it's in water, whether it's boiling water, et cetera, like that. So there's a potential that it could become chametz. So the custom is that it may not be chametz based on the way they make it, but the chances are it could be, so we sell it. But flour is not actual chametz, but we're careful about it. Oats, I believe, are not chametz based on the way they make it, but I would suggest, so you don't have to sell it. So you do have to sell your flour, but you don't have to sell your oats. What about yeast? Now, yeast, back in the day, in the times of the Torah, was basically old bread. They'd make sourdough bread, and then the leftover stuff, they would use that to make new sourdough bread. I'm simplifying it, don't really know what I'm talking about, but old yeast was basically made from chametz. It's not how yeast is made today. Yeast is fine. So you do have to find yeast that is kosher for Pesach if you want to use it. However, you don't have to sell it. What about Play-Doh? Play-Doh is made basically, other than colorings and some chemicals, is basically water. And flour. That sounds literally like chametz. No, that's exactly what chametz is. So here's the thing, though. If you remember what I said from section 1, chametz applies to things that are food. Play-Doh's not food. Might be non-toxic if your child is really, hungry. And I may or may not have had to tell my 1-year-old to where did the Play-Doh go? There was a lot more Play-Doh here when we started. But regardless, Play-Doh's not food. Therefore, you don't have to sell it, nor do you have or throw it away. And you can play with it on Pesach. There's no problem with it. What about things like toothpaste and medicine? So toothpaste and medicines might have things in them that are chametz. But this is actually a kashrut question throughout the year. A lot of toothpaste has glycerin, which is made from animal products, trafe animals. So can we ever use toothpaste? And while many rabbis will suggest try and get a kosher one, if you can get a kosher for Pesach one, it's better. The reality is this: they are not food. Some tiny insignificant amount may get in your mouth, but you don't want to eat toothpaste. You don't want to eat medicine. You take it for health purposes, including vitamins. Therefore, it's not in the category of food, and therefore you don't have to sell it. You don't have to throw it out. And as long as there's a need for them, like you need to brush your teeth, you need to take blood pressure medicine, you can actually eat it on Pesach like normal. Chewy vitamins might be an exception. And if you have vitamin gummies, talk to me separately. But most swallowed pills are not an issue. Perfumes might be made with grain alcohol, and that's a debate. It's certainly not food. If you drink your perfume, you will probably get sick or die. Rav Moshe Feinstein Zatzal said some prisoners would take perfumes and colognes, etc., and denature it and turn it back into alcohol. Or at least theoretically you could. Therefore, he said you have to sell it on Pesach. So many have the custom to do so, but the basic rule is this. If something might have chametz, but it's not food, it's not a big deal. And again, one of my goals tonight is for people to calm down and realize, don't go crazy. You don't have to throw out everything. If your toothpick, said that it might have been in a factory that had, bread flour at some point, it's not food, it's a toothpick. You don't need to sell it. It's totally fine. So again, with flour and oats, our flour you have to sell, but you don't have to get rid of. Oats is fine, just don't use it unless it's special checked for Pesach. But the rest of these things, they're not food. Don't worry about it. Except maybe cologne, because Rav Moshe says you can make alcohol in jail and you go to prison. So any questions on 1.5? And again, one of the practical things here really is for everyone who's selling it, it's a little easier because you could shove everything in a closet and not worry about it if it doesn't say it's kosher for Pesach. But things like toothpaste and medicine are very important. And I'm saying here that they're fine. I would get a new tube of toothpaste because the likelihood of you and a new toothbrush, because you probably brushed your teeth with chametz and then stuck it on the toothpaste thing. And even though technically it's probably not an issue because the food is at that point, it's good to get a new toothbrush around Pesach, especially for the people that only do it once a year on Pesach anyways, which don't do that. Excellent. So the third one, and I'm not going to read this whole list, is kitniot. Kitniot, which might be translated as legumes. And don't ask me to translate that English word because I don't really know what it is. It's this stuff. But basically, there's an old custom to not eat certain kinds of foods that either looked like things that became chametz or like could be confused with it, got mixed together, or people used to make bread from it. There's no one reason for it. And a lot of rabbis said this is not a good custom, but it's too late. Ashkenazi Jews have accepted to not eat kitniot. So the custom for Ashkenazi Jews, which I think is all of us on this call, is to not eat any food or own any food, or not own. We can't eat any food with any of these things. So any kind of beans, buckwheat, caraway, any corn, etc., like that. However, we don't need to sell it. So again, if you're already selling your chametz, it's not a big deal. But theoretically, if you get rid of all the actual chametz in your house and you have nothing left but bottles of water and kitniot, you don't need a mechirat chametz form. You don't need a chametz selling form. You should still, on Friday morning, say any chametz I don't know about, let it be like the dust of the earth, and it's as if I don't own it. But you don't need to do the form if all you own is kitniot. And a lot of people probably don't know that or are confused about that. You don't need to sell kitniot. The custom is not to eat it, but it is not chametz. You can own kitniot. You could run a kitniot store. A Jew can run a bean store on Pesach if they so choose. They can run a poppy seed or rice store. They just can't eat it. An Ashkenazi Jew can go to a Sephardi Jew's house who eats rice and eat food that they made out of their bowls. They can't eat the rice they make, but they can eat at their house. So it's not like forbidden pork or chametz. It's just our custom as Ashkenazi Jews not to eat it for one of any number of reasons that we're not going to get into. So any questions on kitniot and what it has to do with you? And quinoa is fine. It's not kitniot. Oh, Ken, yes. Go ahead. You just got to unclick on.
Yeah, you have rice down there, but maybe Tamar can help me. I always thought wild rice was not really rice, and so I was hoping that maybe just like quinoa fell through the cracks, that maybe wild rice should also fall through the cracks.
So I am not familiar with the differences between wild rice and rice. Tamar, if you know about it, please unmute yourself. You just have here. I'll click on your side if you have. You just have to click Tamar, and just if you have any words on wild rice.
Just look up on Google. I don't think that it is rice.
So in terms of whether it's kosher or Pesach, I don't know the answer off the top of my head. This is why there's
next year.
amazing guides out there. And if anyone's looking it up right now, you can
It's
share.
not chametz. It's not chametz. The rabbis didn't know about it, so they didn't forbid it, just like quinoa. So I think that it's okay. I don't know.
So what's interesting here is there's this interesting conversation. Is kitniot only the things mentioned by the rabbis originally, or is it a category, and anything new we find in the category is forbidden? So the problem is there's both opinions. Tamar, your opinion, which makes a whole lot of sense, I believe Rav Moshe would have agreed with you. What are they? Baruch shekivant is what they say, is, that's awesome. Blessed are you who have the same idea as Rav Moshe about peanuts. And he said, look, they didn't know about peanuts, but they didn't forbid peanuts. So why add peanuts? Well, unfortunately, people decided to add peanuts, but then quinoa, maybe because it was, they said they did their homework and they said, well, quinoa clearly doesn't fit into any category. So they usually do it on a case-by-case basis. So even though wild rice may be a different species and not known at the time, the rabbis would probably sit and look at the reasons. Is it grown in the same fields or similar fields or next to other kitniot and other grains? Does it look like kitniot? Is it used in the same way? And even if it's a different species, if the answer to those questions is yes, it's close to other grains, it's used like other grains, it looks like other grains, even if it's technically not in the kitniot category, it might be forbidden. But that's a Google answer. And a lot of these guides go crazy strict and are actually not so helpful for easy practical advice. But for a master list of what is kitniot, what is not kitniot, that is where you trust the CRC, Star K, and OU guides, et cetera, like that. So it's not a knockout answer, but that's the kind of thought process for what should or shouldn't be included in this list. But quinoa, a lot of, it was kind of used like kitniot, but they found that it was, and I think maybe it was in similar fields or close to, but the rabbis found that it was done separately. There was no issues, didn't fall in any categories, and therefore it is fine. So Google, if anyone wants to Google is wild rice kitniot by the end of this class, you can have it on the recording. So any other questions on the kitniot stuff?
Rabbi, am I still on? Am I on at all?
Yeah. You're there. Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, Rifki.
Oh, I finally, someone in the house helped me and I didn't know
great.
I was even here.
No, you've been here the whole time. Did you have a question about
Thank
kitniot,
you.
Rifki? No, not at all. Well, it's great to have you, Rifki. Okay, so the next thing here, and this is my favorite list every year. I think I sent it out to the congregation. Beautiful resource that does it. It's actually from a bigger list, 67 things that don't need special certification for Pesach, and it has non-food items like Ziploc bags and paper plates, because they're not food. There's no chametz by food, but these are foods that don't need special Pesach. Now, I'm not going to go through this whole list. You can Google it, foods that don't need special certification for Pesach. So some of these things do need at least a regular, for example, raisins. Raisins need to make sure that they're in a factory that doesn't have anything tray for any other chemicals that are not kosher. But for the OU, there's never chametz in their raisin factories ever. So you don't need to buy special, extra expensive Pesach raisins. And that's a big part of the conversation, is when you pay for Pesach things, sometimes you need to buy a Pesach this or a Pesach that. It's ridiculously expensive. Sometimes the increased cost is reasonable because they only sell once a year. Sometimes the markup is a little not so nice. But if you don't need to pay for Pesach hechsher on water, in fact, you never need a hechsher on plain water, ever. As long as it's just water, it does not need to have a kosher symbol. It's just water. But things like raisins just need a regular OU. Extra virgin olive oil also never needs a kosher symbol during the year on Pesach at all. So you would have to go through this list, item, obviously meat. Meat needs to be kosher and have a symbol, but if it's raw meat packed at the plant, like a brisket, doesn't need special for Pesach. If it's shipped to your butcher and they repack it and cut it at their butchery shop, you need to make sure that they kosher for Pesach. Ground beef is a little different the way it's prepared. So obviously you need to go item by item, but this list is amazing because so many things on this list you do not need to buy special for Pesach. One thing, I don't know if it's on here, milk. There's two questions about milk. there's a custom, and that's another class, about whether you need special milk that's certified, watched by Jews, that's called Chalev Yisrael, milk of a Jew, or just regular milk that has a regular kosher symbol. In America, the Orthodox Union, everybody agrees, regular milk, totally fine. What about for Pesach? And the answer is that as long as you buy the milk before Pesach and don't open the milk, regular milk before Pesach, it's fine. And the reason is this: if I have a giant pot, huge pot that's like 60 gallons, I know that's insane, and a tiny, tiny drop of milk, boiling milk, I'm making a soup, and a tiny, tiny drop of gravy accidentally splashes from a cup that's nearby, accidentally. And it's so tiny that there's 1,000 times more milk than that drop, my soup is still kosher. It's not milk and meat, because there's a law that if a tiny amount accidentally mixes in, and there's at least 60 times more of the kosher thing, then the tiny thing doesn't matter. That rule is really important in restaurants and in your house when accidents happen. That rule goes away on Pesach. On Pesach, there are no accidents. If a tiny, tiny drop of chametz gets in anything, you're done for. Don't burn the house down, but you're done for. But that rule of a tiny, insignificant amount of anything disappearing, you can rely on it for milk before Pesach. It's called bittul. So if any chametz accidentally got in your milk before Pesach, the day before Pesach, it's as if it doesn't exist. And then when Pesach starts, the milk is totally kosher. It's a little bit of a kind of wrapping your head and being a little wink, wink, nod, nod. But as long as you buy regular milk before Pesach and then open it on Pesach, you're good. Same thing with eggs, etc., like that. So without going through all of these, any quick questions on these items? Or if you see one and be like, Rabbi, can you say more about that? Yeah, Susan, please.
Butter.
Yes. So butter, I looked up, and there's a reason it's not on this list. So a lot of the things on this list, the reason they're here is because they're either raw or there's no ingredients in them except for the like extra virgin olive oil. There's nothing but oil in it. Salt, a lot of salt has iodine, which is a problem, but pure salt without iodine, there's nothing in there. Water is the quintessential example. There's nothing in there. There's no process to it. However, foods that are processed and they go through a whole complicated process of other chemicals, et cetera, like that, even if it's not a lot of ingredients, usually that requires special certification because it's typically in a factory where the machines or the chemicals they put in them might be generally kosher, but might have come into contact with chametz, or more likely, kitniot. A lot of things that are a problem, in fact, in America, one of the biggest issues with most foods that you need to make sure are kosher for Pesach, like honey, what could be in honey is 1,000 points to whoever tells me what causes most foods, not chametz, what messes up most foods that we need to buy kosher for Pesach versions? Anybody? It's in everything.
Corn.
It's
corn.
Corn syrup. You got it. Who just said that? Corn syrup.
Corn
Absolutely.
syrup.
You got it. So corn syrup. So many things have corn syrup or added. In honey, they don't even have to list it, which is why you need special kosher for Pesach honey because of corn syrup. So the issue with a lot of foods is not chametz, it's kitniot. So butter, I don't remember the exact reason for it, but butter, whether it's where it's made or one of the ingredients, and I'm not saying it is kitniot, but that's a very common one. So butter, unfortunately, you do have to buy kosher for Pesach butter. But Hershey's, the kosher OU cocoa powder, is fine all year round, including for Pesach. Excellent. Any other questions? You can see this list that, again, I sent out to the whole congregation in our email is so helpful because you do not need to buy special for Pesach apples and carrots. The truth is people spend thousands of dollars on all this kosher for Pesach food. It makes life easier, but you could, other than matzah, which technically you could make yourself, other than matzah and grape juice / wine, everything else, you could live on Pesach without buying a single special food for Pesach. All of the special foods, horseradish, romaine, everything for the Seder, charoset, you don't need to buy. With walnuts, walnuts are usually, as long as they're raw walnuts, you don't need special for Pesach one. And all your other food, you could just have milk and you're vegan. Pesach is really easy. It's when you start getting into cakes and all these mixes and ingredients and all these things that you need to get all of the special Pesach ones. You could make Pesach with virtually nothing special for Pesach other than matzah. And the truth is pretty much all grape juice and wine is usually kosher for Pesach anyways. It's very rare to find it not. Good. Any other questions before we move on? Beautiful. And again, I hope that this and the few questions we have are helpful. So this next thing here is helpful, not just for Pesach, but well, after B, then we'll get into koshering. So what do you do with your chametz? And this is super duper quick. So if you have things that are actually chametz, you have two options. You can eat it, destroy it by either throwing out in the trash, burning it, flushing it down the toilet. Throwing out in the trash is probably the best option. And after your bedikat chametz, the search for chametz this Thursday night at 7:52 p.m. or later, you do not have to put out 10 pieces, but the custom, and I do it as well, put out 10 pieces of non-crumbly bread. You say the blessing before you look for it, put it in a bag. If it's safe to do so, burn it out on some cement area, big open area. If it's windy, don't do it. Or you can flush it down the toilet, or put it down your garbage disposal. Or if you can't do that, and on this Friday morning, you're like, I have to destroy my chametz, but I'm not going to make a fire. That's not safe. I can't do it. I don't want to ruin my garbage disposal or my toilet. Put it in a bag, Ziploc bag or something, or a plastic bag. Pour some soap in there. Make it disgusting. Ruin the food. That's why you burn it. Not to make it disappear, but to ruin it. So it's not food anymore. Ruin it and then throw it in the trash can. And then for your kitniot, you don't need to sell it. We just don't need it, so store it away. And if on Pesach you accidentally find a jug of rice or whatever, the bottle of, I don't remember what rice is in, box of rice. You find a box of rice on your counter, stick it in your cabinet. Don't lose your mind over kitniot. And all of the other products that aren't technically kitniot, that aren't technically chametz, things like your regular spices and stuff like that, just put it in a cabinet. Simple as that. Put a piece of tape over it. Don't lose your mind over it. And many of you knew this already, and if you didn't, very simple. Any questions on that and how you store it, where you store it, et cetera, like that? And you don't have to lock it away. So, and because the kitniot and your other stuff that you're not selling, you don't have to lock it away in a cabinet. You don't have to list it on your form. So if you want to stick it in a bag and throw it in your basement, may not be a good idea with bugs, but you don't have to lock it away with a padlock. Your chametz that you're selling, you don't have to padlock it, but you want to put that in a specific sealed place to discourage you from opening it. And when you fill out your chametz selling form, you do need to list, I put it in my cupboard under the stairs, et cetera, like that. Chametz you need to be specific about. The rest of the stuff, out of sight, out of mind. So if Pesach comes, you're like, oh, I left a bag of beans. Don't eat it if you're Ashkenazi. You just stick it somewhere and just don't worry about it. Good. Any questions on that? Yeah, Susan?
What about dishes?
Yeah, so dishes are
do
sorry,
those count as chametz?
So they're an interesting thing, because the issue with dishes is that if we've had chametz on them, hot chametz on them, then technically they're considered chametz, and we're strict. We wouldn't use them on Pesach because of the possibility that we would put hot food on them, and that hot food would soak up, would bring out the chametz. This has a lot to do with the way kosher is transferred and stuff like that. For example, if I take a cold piece of bread and I put it down on my counter, it doesn't even matter what my counter is, and it's a cold counter, and I take the bread away, wipe away any crumbs, my counter's not chametz. I don't have to kasher my counter. It hasn't become treifed up. But my pots and pans, where there's spilling and there's hot and there's cooking of grains and soups and everything like that, they become chametz pots, and there's chametz absorbed into the walls. So there's chametz in them. So we treat all of our dishes as if that's true. But our glasses that we've only had water in during the year, they're not technically chametz. However, this is a general kashrut thing. We tend to do, kind of lowest common denominator, like all or nothing. Just put away all your regular year dishes so you don't accidentally, let's say you have 5 pots, and you know that 4 of them you've used to cook chametz. You've done some sort of, grain soup in them. And 1, for a fact, you've never had anything in there but boiling water, and that's it, because you only make tea, water for tea in there. don't keep that one out because A, you might have accidentally splashed chametz on it, and B, you might get confused. So some of our dishes, we absolutely do consider it as if they have chametz in them. Definitely put it away. And when you sell your chametz, you sell the chametz that's in those dishes. And even though most dishes, most of your plates probably haven't absorbed and soaked up chametz, we just make our lives easy. This is a time where being extra strict does make our lives easier, and we just put them all away, and we just say, I'm selling any chametz that is in them. And again, if you have questions, we have time at the end of class, but that's what we do. All of our dishes we do use during the year, and just so we don't get confused, and the chance they might have chametz in them, we just store them all away and we sell the chametz in them. We sell our dishes, as it were. Good. Any other? That's a great question, Susan. Any other questions on that idea? Beautiful. So koshering. So for some people, this is a big one, whether they have a pot that they were using during the year and they're like, I want it to be a Pesach pot now. So what can you kosher? So the first question here is what materials can be made kosher? Meaning if I bought on eBay a beautiful bowl and I asked the person, what did you cook in here? Or what did you do in here? And they said, oh, I had hot pork and bean soup in that bowl every single night. Can I make that bowl kosher again? So if the bowl is made out of metal, absolutely. If it's made out of wood, you can kosher it by just boiling it in hot water. And there's another way to kosher things through fire. Like you can take a blowtorch to a metal bowl and it's kosher. Don't do that with a wood bowl. Hopefully common sense will tell you why. Stone, real stone, like real stone can be koshered. Natural rubber. And there's a debate about plastic. Some say yes, some say no. Rabbi, if you ask Rabbi Dinan, can I kosher plastic? The answer is yes. And again, there's different opinions, but those that I hold by, which again is a very mainstream opinion, plastic is fine. So if you have a bowl or a spoon or anything like that that's made out of one of these materials, and you have a giant pot and you boil water in it, we'll talk a little bit more about how to kosher things. You can drop that spoon in there and kosher it, and it's good to go. If you bought it on eBay, after you've koshered it, there's a separate practice called toivling, where you take it to Lake Michigan, and there's a special blessing. Blessed are you, God, who has commanded us to dip vessels. And you can ask me about that separately, but you can kosher all these things. The things that we do not kosher, and some of these, again, are just Ashkenazi things, are we do not kosher china plates and glasses. There are rare exceptions for china, fine china, but the custom is not to. If you have a 700-year-old set from your ancestor who happened to be Napoleon, wow, ask me about that. But otherwise, don't kosher china, don't kosher glass. We don't kosher anything made of ceramic or anything made of earthenware. So if you have any of these things and you accidentally trafed it up by making meat and cheese in it, for an Ashkenazi Jew, you're probably out of luck. And if it's cheap, Pyrex, throw it away or give it to a friend who's not Jewish. If it's a family heirloom, stick it on display somewhere if it looks really nice. And again, I'll pause here now. Are there any questions on this? Either specific, that you have something in your house, you're like, oh, I have an old blank. Can I kosher it, Rabbi Dinan? So I'll pause there for a moment. And by the way, if they're, Rifki, click on your side and I'll let you know as soon as we can hear you. There should be an unmute button on your side. You might have to tap the screen and then it should appear. Oh yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, Rifki. Yes, please.
I am so thankful because I used to panic to get everything ready for Pesach. I'm just take a deep breath and leave it alone. I asked you about how do I sell my stuff that's not kosher, and you took care of it for me. That's fine.
Yeah, real easy. Yeah, and that's the goal here is just to not panic. Yeah.
I just can't do it. I had made sure I had the pots and the dishes. I can't do it.
Yeah. And that's really important. When a lot of people come to me and they say, Rabbi, The people have been doing it for 20 years. They don't need this class, or sometimes they need a refresher. A lot of people come and say, I've never kept Pesach a day in my life, or they're converting to Judaism. What do I do? And the first thing I say is don't eat bread. There's obviously a lot more to it than that, but the truth is, at the end of the day, Hashem said, don't eat chametz and do eat matzah. And the rest is extremely important. We want to be careful and everything like that, but not to drive ourselves crazy. And Rifki, what you said is so important. Being on our own trapped in our houses, and we don't have resources, we don't have help, it's really challenging. And we're already anxious enough. Pesach should not bring us more anxiety. It should bring us joy and happiness. And yes, it requires a little effort, but not unreasonable. So our conversation about selling chametz, you did it. You're good. You sold the stuff. You'll put it away so you don't have to worry about it. And no chametz for you. So I'm glad you said that. Susan, did you have a comment? Sorry, I accidentally muted you. No comment. Okay, great. Beautiful. So then again, just a quick thing on koshering. Now, this is really important because I had mentioned, you have a bowl you decided this year you want to start using. Not everybody has that, but there are some things that we do kosher every single year because we're constantly using them, and we need to use them for Pesach as well, like a microwave or a stove or an oven or our sinks that might have hot, pasta in it during the year, but we want to have hot matzah brai, which is basically matzah with egg, and it's beyond delicious. My father-in-law, Rabbi Pernick, makes like the best matzah brai in the world. So the basic thing of all of these, anything you want, stove, oven, microwave, all of these things is clean them. Clean them the best you can. I don't know why I wrote human or otherwise is, use some method cleaner or whatever it is to get off any chametz residue. If you have an oven that has self-clean, that's the otherwise, you can use that to clean. You don't need to sit in there and spray it, because the intense 880 degree heat will so burn any chametz in there that it's no longer food anymore. And that's the key thing here. Remember from I don't remember the exact line, but from Shakespeare outdam spot, about getting the blood off, you can never get it off. So if you're trying to spray on your stove and steel wool and spraying it and shooting it with a gun, nothing will get off that stain. At some point, that stain isn't food anymore. It's not chametz. It's not possible to get it out. Once you've done that much work and it won't come out, it's not chametz anymore. It's time to kosher. Now, in most cases, once you've cleaned it, you wait 24 hours. And the reason for that is after 24 hours, any chametz essence or residue that's inside of things has worn off, has dissipated to the point where, again, it's not food anymore. Again, if I have a piece of bread that I bought a week ago, it's still bread. If I have a piece of bread that my mother forgot to give me, on my bris, and it's 35 and a half years old, it's not bread anymore. It's not even not chametz, it's not even food. So when you're cleaning your house, this is important, I'll mention later, and you're like, I think there might have been behind my oven a crumb that fell when I got married 50 years ago. If you can clean it, do, because ew, but it's not chametz because it's not food anymore. So after 24 hours, it's time to kosher. Now, the way you kosher anything is the way that it would have been treifed up. So a microwave is koshered by heating up something in it. So how do you kosher a microwave? By heating up something in it. And you're not going to heat up food because that might treif it up again. So what do? You heat up water. You get a clean cup that can be microwaved for a long time, and you do it for, there's different opinions, but basically long enough for it to boil. You'll know it's long enough because when you open the microwave, it'll be half empty. So fill the glass cup to the top. When it's half empty, you're good. Move it to another part of the microwave. Why? Because it was covering part of the microwave where the cup was on top of, and that part didn't get koshered. Move it over, let it boil again, and move on. Susan, yes, please, question.
So what kind of cup do you use to kosher the microwave? Do you use a chametz cup or a Pesach cup?
So my suggestion is actually there are these disposable coffee cups that can get really, really hot. But if you don't, I think that's safe. I've done that before. But if not, you can really use any glass cup. And that has to do a little bit with the way glass cups work as long as you've never used the cup for like a hot toddy, which has chametz in it. Again, that's just the way that glass works, as long as, you just haven't ever used it for chametz before. But it's safer to use a cup that's not for, that's not a cup at all, like it's disposable, et cetera, like that, if that's possible. But if you can't do that, use a kosher for Pesach one after you've koshered it. So that's the answer you were looking for. So you do that, kosher the whole darn thing, and then move on with the microwave. The only question is that I said you can't kosher glass. Most microwaves have a glass plate. And that plate, unlike a drinking cup that all there's ever been in there are things like cold soda, cold water, cold whiskey, et cetera, like that, cold drinks that never cooked. The glass plate in the microwave, I hope you've cooked with it. So the custom is that you take it out and you store it away for Pesach. And you either get a new one or you just don't have a glass plate. And that's annoying because you lack the roundabout thing, but that is the custom. And that's the one that I hold by. And it's pretty universal that we just take out that glass plate and then we kosher it. But then we can use our microwaves for Pesach during the year. But that's because we're strict about chametz. During the year, however, we are allowed to kosher the microwave glass plate in the same way. So if you accidentally put tray food in there or you put dairy in a meat microwave, you kosher it the same way, but you can keep the glass plate. For other things like your stovetop, the way you might have trafed it up is you ran the flame on it. So what do? You run the flame on it. You run it on high for a half an hour. Electric stoves, how would it absorb? By running the electric glass stovetop. So how do you kosher it? Run the electric glass stovetop on the highest setting for a half an hour. And highest setting means turn it to high and wait 5 or 6 minutes for it to get to its hottest, and then set a half an hour timer. Do one at a time. It's dangerous, a lot of electricity or gas, gets very, very hot, but boom, it's as simple as that. Your oven, if you do self-cleaning oven, that's it. It cleans and koshers it at the same time. But if you are doing a regular oven and you're cleaning it yourself, then again, set it to the highest setting, 550, whatever, wait for it to reach 550, set a half an hour timer, boom, you're done. Sinks. The issue with sinks might be hot water. So how do you kosher a sink? With, survey says, Susan, I think you're unmuted, so you can answer. It gets traced with hot water, hot water. You can use a hot tea kettle. You can very, very carefully with oven mitts, use a Pesach, a kosher for Pesach pot, get it boiling as hot as it can, and then pour it all over the sink. I like getting an electric tea kettle because you can control the flow of the scalding hot water over it, but that's how you do it. And then for countertops, it depends on what your countertop is made of. If it's a material like stone, or what's the thing someone was mentioned the other day, a material that I didn't know that you can kosher, boiling water, good to go. You don't even need to cover it. If it's made of something like ceramic or earthenware or glass, if you have a glass countertop, I don't know. If it's made of one of those things, you can't kosher it. Very easy. What do? Cover it with something. We do tinfoil. But we also have a wood island. And guess what? You can kosher wood. So what do? Hot tea kettle on our island, and it's good to go. Simple as that. But if you don't want to lose your mind, and again, you don't have hot water, just put some paper towels down. Use a little separation so your mind, so don't drive yourself crazy. And what I will say for fridges, fridge shelves and cabinets, if there's actual crumbs of food, clean it out. Because if you put down a piece of matzah on a pile of breadcrumbs, that could be a problem. But in most cabinets, you're not cooking in your cabinet. So you don't need to line your cabinets. People who spend hundreds of dollars buying special lining things for their cabinet, it's fine. But as long as you clean them out, even with a little bit of spray, you don't need to line them. Fridges, there better be nothing hot spilling in there. I mean, I guess if there's an accident, but again, everything in there is cold. There's no cooking going on in your fridges unless something weird's going on. Therefore, you don't need to cover your fridge shelves. Clean them. I guarantee, I'm sure chametz is spilled there. Just clean it off, but you don't need to cover them as long as you've cleaned off the chametz. You don't need to kosher these cold things. You don't need to cover them. Any questions up until now? And then we're almost done. Yeah, Ken, go ahead, please.
So usually you have some kind of tempered glass on a refrigerator shelf. So if you clean them well, and scour them, you don't have to line them?
Absolutely. When you say scour, you mean with hot water?
Yeah.
You don't
I
need to
mean-
do that. You don't need to kosher it because you haven't cooked on it. The only time you need to the only time you need to kosher something with boiling water is when it's something that would come into contact with a boiling liquid anyways. People spill soups on counters. It happens. That's fine. So kosher a counter or cover it if it can't be koshered because it's made out of earthenware. That does not happen in fridges. And let's say maybe you say, I remember 2 years ago, I put a hot soup in my fridge and a little bit spilled out. Fine. But the truth is, like, your fridge is cold. It doesn't happen. So you don't need to scour it. Don't do that. Don't be pouring boiling water in your fridge. It'll probably cause more problems than anything. Just clean it and boom, you're done. So it's even simpler than that. And if you have little kids, your fridge will be a disaster. Most people, it'll take you 5-10 minutes to clean out your fridge and just do a quick rinse down. If you're not buying 50 bags of fish sticks a year, you don't have piles of crumbs somehow in your ice tray. Such a disaster. But again, for most people, so it's even simpler than that, Ken. And again, simple as can be. Beautiful. Any other questions before we go on to the final thing in the koshering section?
Rabbi,
Yeah, Rivki, go ahead.
I'll tell you something simple. What I used to do with my son,
Please.
I had a dish pan full of baking soda water, and we washed the refrigerator together.
So that isn't, I love that because
Just for Pesach.
yeah,
Just for Pesach.
so koshering with boiling water, don't do that with your 6-year-old, but spray and wipe. I actually have this spray that's like non-toxic and everything like that. It's a great thing to do with little kids and make it a game. So thank you for sharing that, Rifki. Not only a sweet memory, but an excellent suggestion. Things like
We did
that where it's
just
cold.
for Pesach.
Yeah. Well, that's the only time you really, most people only clean once a year anyway. So that's a great suggestion. Thank you, Rifki. So the next one is, again, just a quick continuation for how and this is koshering the whole year, including Pesach, for koshering forks and knives. Again, is you get a pot that's either koshered for Pesach or you're about to kosher it. And as soon as the water is as boiling as you're going to get it, just drop in your spoon, knife, fork, and it doesn't need to be there for any length at all. Drop it in, take it out. Not with your bare hand. Use a pair of tongs that are kosher. And you might have to drop in, and then you say, how do I take those out? And it's an endless recursive loop. But you take them out, or you pour it out in a kosher sink, whatever it is like that. And that's how you kosher forks, spoons, knives. Someone said, oh, I have these knives that are super delicate, which is weird for a knife to be delicate. They said, well, worry about putting them in boiling water. And I said, well, they only need to be in there for like a half a second. And they're like, oh, that's great. How do you kosher a pot? So again, you fill it with boiling water, but here's the issue. You need the water to spill over the sides, and you can't grab the pot and go like this because it'll put out the fire, it'll burn your hands. So what do? Is as soon as it's boiling, you carefully move it over to the sink or outside, whatever, while it's still boiling, and you put in a hot rock that you had in the oven, and again, use lots of gloves, and that hot rock will cause boiling water to spill out over the sides, and boom, kosher the whole thing. And you don't need to do this every year. It's only if you have something you want to kosher for Pesach. And then the final thing that we've kind of hit on all of these, or a lot of these, is how crazy do I go with cleaning? So for crumbs, if there is a microscopic crumb that you are unaware of, if you find it, of course, clean it up. But you do not need to climb in the crawl space to look for crumbs that have been there for 27 years that are no longer food anymore. Now, if you know that a week ago you spilled breadcrumbs down the side of your oven, that you should probably try and clean up. But things that are old and disgusting or super duper tiny, that's not what we're concerned about, because we know not to eat chametz. So what's the issue with cleaning? The issue with cleaning is not just the ownership of it, it's the concern that we might accidentally come to eat it. Most people are not gonna, in the middle of Pesach, climb down on the ground, stick their finger under the oven and say, oh, I need the crumbs, I need the crumbs. That doesn't happen. I'm being facetious, but it doesn't happen. But if somebody leaves out a thing of Cheez-Its, which are real chametz, a bag, and they're walking in the kitchen, they may absent-mindedly, accidentally eat some on Pesach, and that's a big deal. That stuff you gotta get rid of. But taking a toothbrush, again, like under the cabinets and everything like that, it's really not necessary. Do the basic cleaning that's reasonable. Sweep your floors. Should be doing that anyways. Clean the surfaces that you usually cook and clean on. That's not unreasonable. Also, You don't need to do this in every area of your house. If your kids eat in every room, life is a lot tougher. But most people don't eat in the bathrooms. So clean your bathrooms because they're bathrooms, but you don't need to do Pesach cleaning in the bathroom unless you know there's breadcrumbs in there. Kitchen is usually the craziest thing. Dining room, spend a lot of time on. And again, if there's little kids or you eat in front of the TV, the living room, or maybe a bedroom if you eat in bed. But other than that, you only really need to focus on places where you know there's chametz, which might be a purse, a backpack, or I added here, a car. People eat chametz in cars. We all do. We all do it. I've done it. My kids, it's not just because I have little kids, we all do it. So clean out your car. Now, it's hard to get all the crumbs, so do your best. Again, if a tiny, tiny crumb fell in between your seat, if you can easily get it, please do. But you do not need to disassemble your car to scrape out everything. Do your best. With things that are not really chametz or insignificantly small, do your best. For things that are really chametz, do better than your best, but don't drive yourself crazy. And I already mentioned, like, again, permanent stains. If you can't get it out, you don't need to take a knife and cut out a chunk of your countertop because it has a stain that won't come out. Once you scoured it, as Ken said, it's not chametz anymore. At that point, covering cabinets and fridge shelves, we covered that, and that's it for all of my bullet point sources. Obviously, I went into a few details. Some people had questions, but now I'm going to stop sharing of the screen. But now I want to invite